All right, it is about time to begin. Before we begin with our Bible class, I want to start with a word of prayer. And let's see here. Brother Bob, would you lead us in a word of prayer?
Continue to be with us in our labors. May the things that are done truly glorify you and broaden the borders of that precious kingdom. We're also mindful at this time of those that remember who are ill and would ask for your care upon each one and be with those that are caring for their needs. And we're so thankful for those who return back to us who have been dealing with various illnesses and situations, and we're so thankful for your care on their behalf. Continue to watch over us and forgive us as we turn attendance. In Christ's blessed name we pray. Amen.
All right, so I believe we are still waiting on the remote for the PowerPoint. So this is what we're going to do. We're just going to postpone the archaeology class for most likely next quarter. And we're just going to continue doing how to study the Bible class exercises to strengthen our skills in reading and studying the scriptures. And then next quarter, we'll dive deep into rocks. Okay. So last week, we were in Hebrews chapter 1. And in Hebrews chapter 1, or the book of, when talking about Hebrews chapter 1, we did an overview of the book of Hebrews, essentially, which is really what we need to do for every book when we try to outline, no matter what chapter or what verse, we have to essentially do an overview of the book to realize what it's all about. In the book of Hebrews, we looked at what the meaning of the book was, which is Jesus is better. And in chapters 1 and 2, we never got into chapter 2, but we read through chapter 1 and it continues into the next chapter, how Jesus is better than the angels. And if you keep reading in chapter 3 and 4, Jesus is better than Moses, and Jesus is better than Joshua, and Jesus is better than the Aaronic priesthood. And you've got all these different types of Jesus is better than. So what we're going to do is today, we're going to pick another book, another chapter, and we're going to dissect it. And something that we've sort of done without realizing it is every book that we've done, we've actually picked a different type of literature. So the first one we did was in the book of Joshua, which is considered history. It's a history book and a narrative. That's really the type of literature is a narrative. In a narrative, it's a story, not necessarily fairy tale. It's just, that's what a narrative is. It is a story. It is made up of characters. It's got conflict, and it has all of these, it has action. Well, that's what Joshua is, but it's a historical book. And then we went to the book of Hebrews, which is classified as epistle or letters. Even though it is technically a sermon, it still falls under the category of epistles. This morning, we're going to look at poetry. We're going to look at the books of poetry, specifically the book of Psalms. And in the books of poetry, you've got quite a few books. You've got Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Songs of Solomon. And honestly, Lamentations would fall under that. I think Lamentations sometimes gets grouped in with the major prophets because it's written by Jeremiah. But Lamentations is actually a psalm, a lament psalm by the prophet Jeremiah. So Lamentations could actually be categorized as poetry. But in the book of Psalms, there's 150 psalms that we can choose from. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pick Psalm 127. 127. It's 5 verses. It's not very long. But this is honestly probably where we need to be when, or at least for me personally, if I want to do just an exercise of how to study the Bible, usually the book of Psalms is one of the best places to go. Because if you go to a book of the Bible, it can be very overwhelming. The book of Psalms, if you look at it as a whole, there's actually a lot of chiastic structures. There's a lot of flow and parallels and contrasts and links between different psalms. But you could also just look at one psalm as a standalone. And so you don't necessarily have to look at all of the psalms to figure out what this one psalm is talking about. Whereas if you go to the book of Hebrews, you have to look at the whole book before you really start outlining just one chapter. And so if you're ever just really wanting to practice your skills in Bible study and you don't really know which book to go to the book of Psalms. It is a very, very good book to go to practice these skills. In Psalm 127, there's 5 verses, and I know different English translations have different ways of organizing the text. So we got to be careful because the English translators were not inspired, verses, chapters, and things of that nature. And sometimes they'll put little headings above it. Some headings, specifically in Psalms, usually right before verse 1, who it's written by, that I believe that's in the original text. But the actual heading of each psalm, those aren't inspired. Those were not written by inspired men. But they do give some good insight on what it's about. Does anybody have any headings in Psalm 127 in your English translation? What does it say? Okay, a song of degrees for Solomon. Right underneath that, is that like a song of accents of Solomon? Is that, some people have that? Okay. So this is what you really want to look at first when you are reading a psalm, because sometimes it'll have historical background. For instance, I believe it's Psalm 3. It says, a psalm of David when he was fleeing from his son Absalom. And I believe that specific psalm, if I'm not mistaken, is found in 2 Samuel chapter 13, 14, or 15, somewhere in there, where he's being chased by his son Absalom. But here there is no historical background, save for the fact that it was written by Solomon. So sometimes when you're reading a psalm, if it doesn't give you the historical background explicitly, sometimes we can figure it out based on the text, because the text will sometimes give different accounts and specific incidents that took place in history. Okay? So in this psalm, what we're going to do, there's 5 verses, and we're going to try and break it down according to how it naturally flows. Okay? It could be 1 point, it could be 2 points, it could be 5 points, it could be 10 points, and the verse numbers are just there. And it's kind of distracting. So let's read this psalm, knowing that it's written by Solomon, or penned by Solomon, inspired by God. And notice, starting in verse 1, unless the Lord builds the house. No, wait a minute. Let me say this real quick. While we're reading this, I'm going to read it slow because there's only 5 verses. We'll be able to really take our time with this psalm. I want you to have a piece of note paper, and I want you to write down anything that stands out to you. Concepts, keywords, cross-references that may pop up in your mind that may help you in some of these topics. And what's the number 1 question? What does this text say about God? Even if God is not explicitly mentioned, something about God is said, whether it's implied or explicitly said. Okay? Now let's start reading. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman keeps awake in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early and to retire late, to eat the bread of painful labors, for he gives to his beloved even in his sleep. Behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. How blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be ashamed when they speak with their enemies in the gate. Okay, so what stands out to you? Okay, so let's see. Let's do topics mentioned. We could even do observation. Okay, so it talks about the home. What else?
It implies foundation.
Okay, there's a hint of foundation there.
That God has built a house.
Okay, so you mentioned God. What does the text say about God? Okay, so we'll actually have its own category because this is very important. So he's a caregiver. What'd you say? Builder. Ooh, master builder, like that. Okay, I heard guard. He's this kind of goes along with caregiver, provider. What else? Contrast. So you like.
Well, I mean, like first verse, unless the Lord builds the house, unless the Lord guards the city.
Okay, so you see contrast or comparison between man and God. You could almost say superiority. But I like contrasts. God versus man. Okay, what else? Okay, he's a rewarder. What else? Even though there's 5 verses, there's a lot that's said in this psalm. Okay, so I'm glad you brought that out. So let's see, a rewarder or gift giver. And that actually has its own category. One of those is children. There's a few other things that God gives in this psalm as well, but children is a huge part of it in this psalm. In fact, they have their own section in this psalm. So we currently have 3 different lists going on. We've got general topics and observations. We've got a category for God. And then we've got a category for the rewards. Now, what we have just done is we have actually narrowed it down to almost what this psalm is about. Based off of this, what would you say the psalm is about?
If God is not in the home, it's in trouble.
That's it. If God's not in the home, it's in trouble. And you could also, on the flip side, if God is in the home, then there will be rewards. Okay? This is a huge part of the psalm. Whether it's explicitly said or hinted at. I mean, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain. Okay? That doesn't say there's any reward there, but what does that imply? If the Lord does build the house, then their labor is not in vain. Their labor is what? It's fruitful. It prospers. Okay? Which would go back to Psalm 1. A man who meditates on the law of the Lord day and night is like a tree planted by streams of water, and whatever he does, he prospers. Okay? The only way he can prosper is if he is in the law of the Lord, and the law of the Lord is in him. Thy word hath I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee. Okay? So it goes both ways. So you've got general topics, a topic of God, and then the topic of rewards. Now, this one, like I said, I'm going to keep... If I start emphasizing something, it's because it's like a hint of, hey, we need to be focusing on this right here. So we've got general, God, and reward. Okay? So what else do you see? Is there anything? Okay, is that in, let's see, is that in Psalm 27? Happy is the man. What verse is that? Verse 5? Okay, so this is very interesting. I didn't catch this. Some English translations will say, how blessed is the man. This is what's called a beatitude. Okay? Beatitudes are not just in Matthew chapter 5. I forgot how many there are in the book of Psalms. I have to go back and see. There's 7 of them in the book of Revelation. which is very interesting because the book of Revelation is very symbolic, especially with the Jewish community, and so numbers is a huge thing. So one beatitude in Psalms, I believe, is also in Psalm 1. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the way of sinners, nor sit in the seat of the scornful. And if you look at a beatitude, I'm really glad you brought this out because I can now add this to my list. Like these are golden nuggets. Anytime you see a beatitude, make a note of it in your Bible. These are amazing because a beatitude is an instruction. Okay, so 128 has one. How blessed is it? Okay. Hang on, let me make a note of this real quick. So we got 127, verse 5, 128. What did you say it was? Verse 1? Okay. Okay. So let me see something real quick. Song of accents. Interesting. So if you look, I don't want to get too bogged down in this, but this actually happens a lot with David's Psalms. I don't know if this is a Psalm of Solomon in 28, 29, and 30 here, or 128, 129, and 130, because in 131 it then says Song of Accents of David. So it almost looks as if, and we have to do some research on this. This is me kind of discovering some things here as well. So you're seeing me kind of trying to figure this out. It almost looks like Psalm 127 through 130 might go with each other. Even though they're separate psalms, psalms do that. That's why I said if you practice in psalms, it'll really help you because there are psalms that you can put all together because they're meant to be like that. And there are some psalms that are just standalone psalms. So you've got 127 through 130 that possibly could be Solomon's songs because all of them have to do with the songs of accents. And then in 131, it's the Song of Accents, but it's of David. And then you've got it again in 133. 134 just says accents. 135 doesn't even have anything. It's almost like 135 is a continuation of 134. So I know that this is a whole lot being thrown at. But what I'm saying is this. If you see something that recurs and it's very similar that's also in the next psalm, that might not be a coincidence because some psalms build off of each other. For instance, Psalm 120, let's see. No, not Psalm 120, Psalm 23. You don't have to turn there. I'm just making sure I got the right psalm so I don't give you the wrong one. Okay, so that is Psalm 123? That's 123. Psalm 23. So Psalm 122, 123, and 124 all deal with something. So if you look at Psalm 122, it talks about, is that the psalm about the crucifixion? Where it talks about, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? That must be 24 then. Let me see. Yeah. So Psalm 22 is a cry of anguish and song of praise. So that is actually a psalm that Jesus quotes while on the cross. And it's talking about Mount Calvary. In Psalm 24, it is talking about the Mount Zion, which is where God's throne reigns. And then right in the middle is the valley of the shadow of death. Okay, so essentially what the psalmist has done is, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So essentially what the psalmist has done is he's painting a picture of a prophecy about Jesus the Christ, where Psalm 22 is a picture of Jesus' suffering. Psalm 23 is we don't have to worry about suffering because Jesus suffered for us. And Psalm 24 is Jesus is now reigning because he suffered so we don't have to suffer. Okay, now I'm not going to go into each verse and explain how all of this works. That can be your own assignment for your own worksheet. Or, we can do this maybe next Sunday and start doing Psalm 22 through 24. But this is an example of what Psalm 127 perhaps might be with a Psalm of Solomon. Now that we've gotten done chasing that rabbit, let's get back to Psalm 127. I love the book of Psalms. It's so good. Okay, so what else do you see in Psalm 127? And this might be all the observations that we make for now. Because we've got a lot to go off of. We've got home and the foundation. God is a caregiver, a provider. He's the master builder. He is a guard. There's a contrast between God and man. And he is a rewarder. Now, we do need to make this, because this is going to determine how our outline is going to be because of what's talked about. What other rewards are mentioned by God or that comes from God in this psalm? Okay, shall not be ashamed. So what's the opposite of ashamed? Shameless, okay. So I can't give you shamelessness. What would God give so you won't be ashamed? Confidence, okay, that's in the right direction for sure. Honor, okay, he'll give you honor. Okay, what else? Sleep, rest. What else? Peace. Look in verses 1 and 2. We kind of already looked at verse 2.
In contrast to following the Lord, not following him, I guess.
Okay, so what does he give? Okay, so he gives structure. That talks about the building. Structure. Going back to the some follow him, some don't. What is that? What does God give? It's not really a reward per se, but it's something that God gives. Okay, he gives assurance.
Stability.
Okay, stability we'll put with structure. There's something specific here. I like what you said, Brother Doug. Some follow him and some don't. What does God give? He gives it to all of us. Huh. Choice. He gives us a choice. Now, this word choice is going to be huge for this psalm. A huge, huge key to this psalm. Because God gives us a choice in different aspects of our lives, and there's different aspects of our lives in this psalm. Specifically, 2 different aspects of our lives. And it somewhat applies, from Solomon's point of view, he's almost writing about fathers here. Okay? Have you seen something about fathers perhaps? And of course, wives can do this too. I mean, it's not just solely for husbands, but in the roles of, generally speaking, typically this would fall to the man, okay, the husband and the father. What is this psalm, based off of these things, would you say that Solomon is writing about?
About leading the family in all the right ways and being the head of the household in the way God intended it to be.
Okay, that's it.
Spiritually.
Okay, so that's Joshua 24, verse 15? 15 or 15? That would be an amazing cross-reference for this psalm, okay? Because Solomon is writing about how not to lead a house and what not to overlook in the house. Those are the 2 main things. Now that we've got our notes here, let's start outlining the text. Okay? I know our notes are not necessarily organized. We've got them in categories, which is organized, but now we're fixing to organize our thoughts pertaining to the text. So with us now knowing that it is about fatherhood, being a husband, working, having children, having God in the home, being rewarded by God, having a choice, all of those things are crucial to this next step. We just did step number 1, observation. Now we're fixing to do interpretation. Okay? We're fixing to outline the text and find its meaning. Okay? Now, in reading this, did you find any breaks? Natural breaks? Sometimes I'll give you a hint. Well, this is not really a hint. This is just something that we need to know when reading our English translations. Sometimes in our Bibles, we will see this little symbol here. Do y'all have this symbol right next to y'all's verses? It depends on the English translation. Okay, this, if you look at an English text, sometimes there'll be one of these perhaps right in the middle of the chapter, right in verse number 8. And then it would continue to verse 9, to verse 10, to verse 11, and then maybe you might see it again. Okay, in verse 12. That is signifying to the reader there is a natural flow and a natural break in the original text. Okay? I don't know if it's because different English translations have it. There is 1 in this psalm, which means there's most likely 2 main points in this text. Okay? So, like, none of y'all have this symbol at all. If you do have it, raise your hand. Okay, you've got it. Where is it? It's in verse 3. Okay? So, let's look at this. So, if it is the case that this is correct, that it is, no, not, it's going to be verse 2. Yeah. If it is the case that it starts in verse 3, this natural break, that means that when reading this text, starting in verse 3, there will be a key word, whether it's therefore, however, behold, something that signifies a transition. Okay? Is there a word that has that? What is it? Behold, lo. Okay. So lo is the same thing, behold. Is that King James? King James? Yeah, lo. So if you look at the psalm, there's a natural break in verse 3. And you don't see another natural break for the rest of the psalm, so that means there's 2 points. Okay? So, now that we have found the natural break, and if you don't have this symbol, that doesn't mean that we're just lost and we can't find the natural break. That's where key words comes in. These are just tools. These right here, these are tools that help in our study in the English translation. Okay? But you can find the break with key words such as lo, behold, therefore, blessed is the man. Okay? That would signify a transition. A beatitude would signify a transition in the text. So what is verses 1 and 2 talking about? Let's figure out what these 2 verses are. Okay. All right, I like that. So we've got provision. Let me do another marker here. Please work. We've got provision. Well, let's look. We've already made observation. So let's mentally bring our list around, and as we're reading, let's start putting all the puzzle pieces together. Because what we did in observation is we separated the colors and the corners and the end pieces, okay, in a puzzle. Now we're starting to put them together. Provision is going to be key for this section. Let's see here. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman keeps awake in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to retire late, to eat the bread of painful labors, for he gives to his beloved even in sleep. Did you notice a key word that's said 3 times? Vain. Vain. Okay. So key word here is vain. What is Solomon describing in verses 1 and 2? Practically speaking, even an hour every day, what is he describing? Okay. It's vain for us to, that's very general, you're correct, but worry about what?
God's way or our way.
Okay. We do what God's way or our way?
Well, in this case, take care of the home, watch out for the home.
Okay. In the workspace. Okay. Remember, this is somewhat talking about the father and the husband's role here. Okay. Because Solomon, being both of those things, he talks about working and he talks about his children. Okay. Now, this is where application tries to seep in, and we want to try and be careful not to make application yet because we haven't even outlined the text. But sometimes it's just there. And sometimes it'll kind of help us outline the text. So we've got 2 main points here and 2 subjects that Solomon is talking about. The workplace and your family at home. What tends to happen, generally speaking, whether it's the husband or even the wife that may work, what tends to happen? Not all the time, but what sometimes tends to happen when somebody goes to work and they're focused on trying to provide for their family, what sometimes gets overlooked? The family. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're so worried about your family and providing for them that you neglect them because you're trying to provide so much for them, that you then forget to provide the thing that is the most important, which is what, according to verses 1 and 2? God. Yeah. If God's not there, your labor is in vain. If God's not there, you're eating bread in vain. You can put food on the table, but if God's not there, it doesn't matter if you're eating bread. You could be working day. You can get up way before the sun rises, and you can go back home way after the sun sets. But if God is not there, your labors are in vain.
Obviously, we've talked about what this psalm is focusing on specifically, but it's applicable in so many other things. And really, the principles that are brought out in this psalm, we should apply in every aspect of our life. Colossians 3:17.
Yep. Absolutely. Yes. 100%. And that's what I really love about the Psalms. The Bible entirely is timeless, from Genesis to Revelation. There are texts and laws, obviously, that were for a specific time, but even those things are for our learning, according to Paul. But there are some things that, even though it was written a long time ago, books like Psalms, the principle never dies. The law may die, but the principle never dies, because where does the principle come from? It comes from God's self. He is these things. He is love. Well, what was a law in the Old Testament under the law of Moses? Love your neighbor as yourself. Well, that law's dead. That means I don't have to love my neighbor. Well, that's not true, because Jesus says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. That's a new commandment that he's fixing to set. What's this commandment, Jesus? That you love one another as I have loved you. Okay? So the principle is still there because the law reflects the lawgiver. So the Psalms, these are just songs. This is an inspired songbook. You know, we've got our songbook. This is a songbook by God, which is very sad because we hardly ever sing songs out of these when we really should, because we're told to sing songs, hymns, and spiritual songs. Okay? So this is kind of a movement for me to try and start singing songs that God wrote, but anyway, that's free. So with that being said, with this psalm, this song that God wrote through the hand of Solomon, what is God singing about? Number 1, verses 1 and 2, he's talking about what? And with this idea right here, provision, vanity, which is interesting because what else does Solomon write about? Considering all of these things, really this whole psalm. Think about the book of Ecclesiastes. Yeah, the whole duty of man is to fear God and keep his commandments. I sought happiness in money. I sought happiness in reveling. I sought happiness in women. I sought happiness in drinking and drugs and food and all of these things, and I couldn't find it. It was all vain. And so if God's not there, all I'm doing is in vain. So another cross-reference, you could put the entire book of Ecclesiastes. That's a very long reference, preacher. Well, that's God wrote it. This is actually what you could do is Psalm 127 is a key passage for the book of Ecclesiastes. That's really what you could do. Kind of a summary of the book of Ecclesiastes. So, verses 1 and 2, what do we have? Vanity without God. I like that. Vanity without God. And under this, I mean, you could do this, verse 1 and verse 2. Let's see here. What does verse 1 say? Labor in vain, watchmen, rise early, eat bread. So that's all talking about the workplace. But what you could do is then go deeper and break it down. Well, vanity without God in the workplace. Vanity without God in the home. Okay, you could really dive deeper into this, but we're running out of time. We'll just have to focus on these main points here. So this could be something you do at home. What are these two verses specifically talking about? Now, what about verses 3 and 5? There's a transition. Behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. How blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be ashamed when they speak with their enemies in the gate. Now, there are 3 verses here. 3, 4, and 5. And even though all 3 of them are talking about the same thing generally, each one of these verses gives a different aspect about the home and the children. What does verse 3 say about the children? Okay, they are a gift. What about verse 4?
Blessing to the father.
They are a blessing.
Blessing to earthly father.
What about verse 5? Well, I guess verse 5 would probably be conjoined with verse 4, to be honest, because it's still talking about arrows and quivers.
I think verse 5 would be blessings, and verse 4 would be the direction in which
Okay, so, that's good. I like that. So you've got verse 4 and verse 5. Verse 5 is the blessing. But even though they're blessings and they're gifts, they're also responsibility. Well, how are they a responsibility?
Verse 5 says you should have a bunch of them.
Okay. You should have a bunch of them. You should be, but you should be fruitful and multiply. Yeah. And, we're kind of chuckling about that, but, I'm glad you brought that up because what was a command that was given from the very beginning? When was that command ever revoked? Because the law of marriage was put in place at the beginning, and Jesus says it was never meant to be this way. It was supposed to be as it was from the beginning. So there are some laws that are dead, but there are some that are a standing, hey, this is how God had intended it to be from the beginning.
It's a principle of God.
Yes.
God doesn't change, his principles don't change.
Anthony, I think it's interesting. This particular psalm is very interesting. The part about of comparing children, blessings from God, as arrows in a quiver. When you think of a quiver of arrows for a man, what are those? What is the purpose? It's to help provide. It's those things arrows are. If we're living our life right, if we're conducting ourselves right in the household and raising our kids the way God intended, they too are tools such as future soldiers and to because our purpose is to glorify God and carry forth His purposes. And that's the intention of those children.
Yep.
They're blessings to us, but they're to be for that purpose.
Exactly. And just here's where we make a deeper application. So you've got the application of we as parents here on earth have gifts, responsibilities, and blessings. Solomon pinned this down. He's got children. We know he has at least one, Rehoboam. Wasn't Jeroboam also, or no? I heard somebody say Jeroboam. I don't know where that came from. Maybe I just dreamt that. Rehoboam for sure. But he also, he was a king. He had responsibilities. And perhaps he overlooked his family. And he was saying, don't do what I did. Here's an even deeper application. Who's the true author of this psalm? God. So what is God saying about his children?
We should be blessing for him. We should be doing we should live our lives in such a way that God is blessed.
Exactly.
By our lives.
Reflect our training.
Yes. Absolutely.
Also think about an arrow being sent out to
Go ye therefore and teach all nations. Now, something we have to be careful with, children are described as arrows, and if I knock an arrow and I'm pointing it at a target, and I let go, unless I do something, that arrow is going to go exactly where I want to. Maybe unless there's some interference. But a child is a free moral agent. I can point them in a direction, but ultimately they've got to make the decision. So what do I need to do? I've got to be responsible and show them the direction. Now it's going to be up to them on where they go. Just at how God sends us out into the world, we have a choice to make. He has shown us the direction. He has shown us the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus the Christ. But he says, you've got a choice. Remember at the beginning of this, a choice, okay? Now, we're running out of time, so I don't want to get too into this right now. So with all of this being said, what would you say Psalm 127 is about? We haven't given a title for 3 through 5. So vanity without God. You could say God's children or children from God. Okay, I'll do this and use some of these words: gifts and blessings from God. Oh, that's even better. Rewards from God. Now, what would you say? Ew, gross. Got two different letter D's going on here. Now, what would you say Psalm 127 is all about?
We choose God's way or we choose our way.
Okay. So we choose God's way or we choose our way. So there's a choice.
Our way is vain.
Okay. Man's way is vain. Let's see. Man's way is vain. What would you say?
The rewards of man's way is not good.
Okay, the rewards of man's way is not good. We could, that would be under this right here. So man's way is vain. Okay, is that how we're going to leave it? Man's way is vain, but God's way is a blessing.
Matthew 6:33.
6:33. That's after, is that, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you? Yep. And that whole chapter is good because Jesus is talking about anxiety and stress, and don't go after the things of men because the Gentiles eagerly seek these things. It's vain. Yeah. It's almost like the Bible is inspired and it all connects. Yeah. All right, so that's Psalm 127. Is there anything that y'all would like to study for next week? Because we're essentially just picking different chapters or psalms of the Bible and just doing exercises. Is there one that stands out or that y'all have really just wanted to go through? I'm really giving you a chance to pick something here. I'm giving you a chance to do like Revelation or something. So we've done different types of literature. We've done narrative, we've done epistle, we've done poetry or poetic literature. There's apocalyptic or prophetic, which we can do Revelation or the major and minor prophets. We could do Proverbs. Proverbs, even though it falls under the category of poetry, it's a standalone category. Proverb, good actions. You want to do Proverbs? I want to do Proverbs too. Okay, all right. Is there a specific chapter in Proverbs? Chapters 1 through 9 or 1 through 10, you could actually do expositorily, like what we're doing. After chapter 10, it's almost just topical. There's not really a specific structure to it. It's just kind of like a topical preaching.